husband had a dream, but he was no dreamer. He moved and he did.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about none other than Coretta Scott. Let's get started. Coretta was born on April 27, 1927 in Marion, Alabama. Scott's parents, Obadiah Scott and Bernice McMurray Scott, were farm owners committed to ensuring their children received the best education possible. And her mother was musically talented. Scott King experienced racism from a young age. Her family's land ownership made them a target for white racists who burned down their homes and terrorized her father because he would not sell his lumber mill. As payback, they torched the business. As a child, King expressed interest in music and quickly excelled in grade school as lead in the choir. Coretta was as well known for her singing and violin playing as her civil rights activism. She attended Lincoln High School, graduating as the school's valedictorian in 1945, and then enrolled at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, receiving her Bachelor of Arts in Music and Education in 1951. While at Antioch, Scott studied voice and music education. She also became a member of the local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, as well as the Race Relations and Civil Liberties Committees. In an article, Why I Came to College, published in Opportunity in 1948, Scott wrote that college graduates had greater freedom of movement. They went on trips, they visited cities, they knew more about the world. She later credited Antioch with preparing her for her role in the civil rights movement, stating that the college's emphasis on service to mankind reinforced the Christian spirit of giving and sharing and provided a new self-assurance that encouraged me in competition with all people. A scholarship to the New England Conservatory of Music drew Scott King to Boston, where she met King in 1952, and the couple wed the following year. After they moved to Montgomery, Alabama, so King could serve as pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, the pair became involved in the historic Montgomery bus boycott, which challenged segregated seating and other forms of discrimination on the city's bus lines. King was thrust in the spotlight by his leadership of the Montgomery Improvement Association during the 1955 boycott, but Scott King contributed to the cause as well. In January 1956, segregationists bombed the King's home while Scott King and their newborn daughter were in the house. They were physically unharmed, but family members urged Scott King to leave town. She made the courageous choice to remain in Montgomery. She said, "Well, you know I'm married to Martin, but I'm also married to the movement. I'm not leaving," Reynolds says. She also used her vocal and music training to raise money for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which King co-founded by performing freedom concerts, in which she discussed the importance of the civil rights movement. Reynolds said that meeting activist, actor, and singer Paul Robeson previously influenced her to put on these concerts. Scott King faced pressure, even from her husband, to focus on being a wife and mother and sideline her desire to be a civil rights leader, but she felt as called to fight social injustice as her husband. During the 1963 March on Washington, where King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, Scott King was not beside him through no fault of her own. She wanted to march with him because she always did, Reynolds says. He said, no wives can march. And they had said that no woman could make a major speech. So now there's this great moment, and they said, no, you can't go on April 4th, 1968. Her husband was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Before his death, King had been slated to lead a strike for sanitation workers in the city. Certain that he would have wanted the event to proceed, Scott King led the march. Just days after King was killed, she also spoke at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where her husband had been pastor. About 3 weeks after the assassination, Scott King spoke at a New York City anti-Vietnam War protest. And in May 1968, she participated in the Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C. that her husband had planned prior to his death. She led a delegation of women on Mother's Day during the demonstration, which included a tent city and lasted for more than a month to raise awareness about poverty and joblessness across different communities. Even after Martin's assassination, that did not stop the surveillance of the King family, and Burrell says, because her activism didn't stop, because she became involved in more groups and more causes, because of her work to stop nuclear proliferation, her efforts on behalf of women's rights, her advocacy of LGBT equality, she was considered a subversive figure in the eyes of the FBI. In 1968, she started the King Center for Nonviolent Social Change, which she led until her 1995 retirement. In addition to peace, the Atlanta-based center champions causes such as equality and justice and serves as a King Memorial. Scott King worked to get her husband's papers housed at the King Center, no easy task, because some of his writings were in academic institutions loath to part with them. Through the King Center, she also advocated for the national holiday in her husband's honor, first observed on January 20th, 1986. This was a long struggle to get the King holiday approved, Burrell said. It took a lot of political lobbying and maneuvering over a number of years, and I think it was eventually signed into law rather reluctantly. But the work that she and other political allies did to cement Dr. King's legacy was really important. During the 1980s, South African apartheid attracted global attention, and Scott King participated in many protests against that system of racial segregation. She advocated for South Africa to face economic sanctions because of its apartheid regime. The King Center taught 300,000 South Africans nonviolence techniques ahead of the nation's first political race with ethnically diverse candidates. And when Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president, Scott King witnessed the historic event. As she fought against apartheid, Scott King also called for protections for LGBTQ+ people. She spoke at functions organized by advocacy groups such as the Human Rights Campaign and Lambda Legal. She actually preached a sermon talking about how gay rights were human rights, which was very courageous, Reynolds says. Consistently, she called for peace, opposing the Gulf War in the 1990s and the Iraq War in the aughts.
Of civil and human rights for gay and lesbian people. I've always felt that homophobic attitudes and policies were unjust and unworthy.
Having dedicated her life to the struggle for freedom, Coretta Scott King died in 2006 from complications of ovarian cancer at age 78. The next year, Antioch College opened the Coretta Scott King Center, which focuses on human rights and social justice. One thing about Coretta Scott, she was truly a hero. She has carried the message of peace, nonviolence, and the need to work against injustice on several continents and to all corners of the United States. If you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe. See you guys in the next video.
The movement started because something happened here in Montgomery that was unique in our history. An idea whose time had come. A man and a moment in history converged. And we began a long walk for freedom.